Welcome one and all. I am Subirthana MS from the Department of Public Policy, M.O.P. Vaishnav College for Women. In today's session, we are going to look into the 73rd Constitutional Amendment Act that was responsible for the decentralization of the Indian nation. So let's start with the introduction. The 73rd Amendment Act of 1992 gained significance by not only institutionalizing the Panchayat Raj system, but also initiated India's largest exercise of democratic decentralization. So this Panchayat Raj Act that was passed in 1992 under the 73rd Constitutional Amendment was responsible for the complete decentralization of the Indian nation. Along with this act also gave the powers and responsibilities to a range of issues such as resource management, family planning, education and health. Under this act of 1992, the entire nation was able to decentralize the powers and responsibilities to the grassroots level of the nation, that is your villages and the rural background. So the act unleashed the power of the grassroots to give representation to the voiceless and disadvantaged sections of the country. So under the 73rd Constitutional Amendment Act, scheduled caste, scheduled tribes and women were given representation in the grassroots politics of the entire nation. Complete decentralization was enabled in the country, and where women were able to participate in the day-to-day activities of how the country is moving forward. So let's next look into the history behind the amendment. What is the reason why this amendment came into existence primarily? So if we talk about the 73rd Constitutional Amendment, even though it was constitutionalized in the year 1992, the concept of Panchayat Raj or the concept of decentralization in India is not new to the nation. We have been talking about decentralization since a long period, even before the independence of the country. So since the time of ancient period, the idea of Panchayat Raj has existed in India, but was not popular until the 73rd Amendment Act. Only when we were able to constitutionalize this Panchayat Raj system in India, it was popularized in the nation. The need for decentralization in India was emphasized for a long time. The size of the country, the uneven resource endowment, the societal stratification that exists in India in terms of language, culture, etc., the difference in social and economic development that persists across India have played a major role in why decentralization is extremely important and has a significant role to play in the development of the entire nation. So there are certain committees that worked towards the constitutionalization of the 73rd Amendment Act or introduction of Panchayat Raj in the Indian nation. So the first and foremost committee that is responsible for this is the Balwant Mehta Committee that was introduced or established in the year 1957. So this Balwant Mehta Committee was responsible for the establishment of the scheme of democratic decentralization, which is also known as the Panchayati Raj system that exists today in the country. The Balwant Mehta Committee was a committee appointed by the Government of India in 1957 to examine the working of the Community Development Program that was introduced in the Indian nation in the year 1952. So under this Balwant Mehta Committee, there were a lot of recommendations that were put forward. So one of the major recommendations that was put forward was the three-tier system of Panchayati Raj, which comprises of the Panchayati Samiti, which exists at the block level, the Gram Panchayat, which exists at the village level, and the Zilla Parishad that exists at the district level. Apart from this, there are various other recommendations that were put forward under the Balwant Mehta Committee. So the first recommendation was this Panchayat Raj aims to hold Panchayat elections regularly every 5 years and to appoint a state finance commission to make recommendations as regards to the financial powers of the Panchayats. So by making sure that every 5 years we are able to introduce elections in the Panchayat level, it democratizes the entire nation or the functioning of the entire country. Next recommendation, preparation of the economic development plan and social justice plan. Apart from this, implementation of scheme for economic development and social justice in relation to 29 subjects given in the 11th schedule of the constitution. The Panchayat Raj was also given the responsibility to levy taxes, duties, tolls and fees. The Panchayat Raj was also given the responsibility or was recommended to establish a district planning committee and to plan a development plan draft for the district. Next, we have listed out the 3 tiers of Panchayat Raj, one that exists at the village level, another that exists at the intermediary level or the block level, and the third that exists at the district level. So, what is Panchayat Raj? Panchayat Raj is a system of governance in which Gram Panchayat are the basic unit of administration, where the lowest unit is allowed to plan and implement everything that can be performed most effectively at the level, and only the residual is left to the higher levels. So, basically what this means is Gram Panchayat consists of all the population that exists in the village level. Every member of the village will be members of the Gram Panchayat, and they will be given representation to decide and plan on how the village should be administered. The representatives in the Gram Panchayat, the Panchayat Raj representatives, will be chosen from the Gram Panchayat itself, which makes it much easier or effective in the administration of the rural sectors in India. The Panchayat Raj system was first adopted by the state of Rajasthan in Nagaur district on 2nd October 1958. Second state was Andhra Pradesh, while Maharashtra was the 9th state to establish the Panchayat Raj system. So, even though the 73rd Amendment Act was introduced or adopted in the year 1992 in the constitution, Panchayat Raj system was existing since the year of 1958 in India. Next, the next most important committee when we talk about Panchayat Raj is the Ashok Mehta Committee, which was established in 1977, and under the recommendations of the Ashok Mehta Committee, the constitutionalization of the Panchayat Raj happened in the year 1992. It was the Ashok Mehta Committee that said that if we are able to constitutionalize or we are able to give a constitutional status to the Panchayat Raj in India, then every state will have to adopt this system, and by which we will be able to decentralize the country in a successful manner. So, in 1977, this Ashok Mehta Committee made recommendations to either have a 2-tier system of Panchayat Raj depending on the population of each and every village, and also to constitutionalize the Panchayat Raj system in India. So, what happened in 1992? In 1992, the 73rd Amendment of Indian Constitution has done with several aims for the development of grassroots level, scheduled caste, scheduled tribes and women reservation. So, under this constitutionalization, only when the Panchayat Raj was introduced in the Indian Constitution, scheduled caste, scheduled tribes and women representation was given through the Constitution to the people belonging to the rural backgrounds. Next, here we see the various responsibilities and duties that exist in the Panchayat Raj system. So, if you take the Gram Panchayat, their responsibilities and duties are particular to agriculture, communications, water supply, health, finance. These are the areas in which they will be concentrating on making plans or decisions. Next, we move to the Mandal Parishad, which is the intermediary level, which is responsible for the natural resources, human resources and infrastructure of the rural sectors. Next, we move on to the Zilla Parishad, which is the district level planning, which is responsible for the planning and finance, rural development, agriculture, education and health, women welfare, social welfare works. So, all of these will be the responsibilities or duties of the Panchayat Raj in India. Next, you have the salient features of the 73rd Constitutional Amendment Act of 1992. The first salient feature is that this Panchayat Raj system adopted the 3-tier system in India. most of the states started to adopt this panchayat raj system and introduced a 3-tier system wherein they had a village level representation. They also had a representation at the intermediary level and another representation that exists in the district level, which will oversee the functioning of the other 2 levels. Apart from this, the 2-tier system was also given authority to exist in India, wherein a village that has less than 20,000 population or 2 million population can have a 2-tier system. They do not have to have an intermediary level. They can have a level at the village level and at the district level. They do not have to have a body that exists at the intermediary. Next, regular conduct of Gram Sabhas and ward committees comprising all persons enrolled in the voters list. So, this is one of the most important aspect when you talk about Panchayat Raj. So, when you talk about decentralization of powers in a country like India, decentralization is extremely important because it gives representation for each and every member to take part in the democratic process of the country. So, one of the salient features of the 73rd Constitutional Amendment Act is to make sure that you have regular meetings that are held at the Gram Sabhas. Every person that belongs to a particular village will be a member of the Gram Sabha. Whoever is of the age 18 and above will be enrolled in the list of the Gram Sabha, and they will have active participation in the decisions that are made on how the village should function. What are the responsibilities that should be taken by the village panchayat? All of this will be discussed in the Gram Sabha. So, this is one of the important features of the Panchayat Raj institution. Next is direct election to MPTC, Zilla Parishad, Sarpanch, ward members, and indirect election to the Mandal Parishad and chairman of the Zilla Parishad. So, what happens here is there is direct election. The members of the Gram Sabha go and vote directly for their representatives, which will also which also increases the democratic process of the country. So, next you have under the salient features of the 73rd Constitutional Amendment Act, you have specific seats that are reserved for the scheduled caste, scheduled tribes and the women representatives of each and every particular village. This also makes sure that every minority in the country is given representation in the democratic process of the country or the decision making process of the country. Next, chairpersons of the panchayats at all levels also shall be reserved for the scheduled caste and scheduled tribes in proportion to their population. So, the chairpersons that are elected under the Panchayat Raj institution, in this also depending on the population of the village, there will be reservations given for scheduled caste and scheduled tribes to become chairpersons of the village panchayat. Next, you have reservation to backward classes. Other than that, some of the salient features are 1/3 reservation for women in all categories, ordinary elections for every 5 years in the event of dissolution, elections compulsorily within 6 months. So, what this basically means is that every 5 years election should happen with respect to Panchayat Raj institutions. In case within the completion of 5 years, a Panchayat Raj had to dissolve due to unfavorable reasons, then within 6 months the next election should commence and the next set of representatives for the village panchayat or the Panchayat Raj institution should come into possession. Next, constitution of election commission in each state for superintendence, direction and control of the electoral rolls. So, what this basically means is that when recommendations were put forward to establish the Panchayat Raj system, one of the main recommendations that were put forward is that the elections for the Panchayat Raj institution will happen under the authority of the State Election Commission. So, the State Election Commission should constitute the elections for the Panchayat Raj, and they should also make sure that these elections are happening in a very orderly manner. Next, Constitution of State Finance Commission to determine the principles on the basis of which adequate financial resources would be ensured for panchayats and municipalities. So, another recommendation that was put forward under the 73rd Constitutional Amendment Act is that every Panchayat Raj institution in every state should have their own finance commission that works under the control of the state government, wherein which they will be able to put forward recommendations depending on their financial needs. So, these are the recommendations that were put forward under the 73rd Constitutional Amendment Act of 1992, which is responsible for the decentralization of the Indian nation, that is responsible for giving representation to the village mass of the country. Considering that 72% of the nation still belongs to the agrarian sector, decentralization was extremely important in a country like India. Also considering the ethnic differences and the diversified nature of the nation, decentralization helps in giving representation to every minority in this country. So, the 73rd Constitutional Amendment Act is majorly responsible for the democratic decentralization of the country, that is responsible for enforcing equality on all stratas of the society. So, from whatever we have seen in today's session, it is clearly understood that the 73rd Constitutional Amendment Act is responsible for the decentralization of the country and has paved way for the democratic nature of the country to sustain in a very successful manner, wherein we give representations for every minority in the country, including scheduled castes, scheduled tribes and women representatives, where they are also given leadership roles to play and they take part in the decision making of the functioning of the entire nation. So, when you talk about the Panchayat Raj system, this acts as the forerunner to push the country forward towards the complete development of the rural sector, and which also pushes the country towards becoming a developed nation as a whole. Thank you.